Hey guys, it's Ben here with the Half Court Heave on YouTube. I'm here with my host Arjun. Isaac couldn't make it, Colin couldn't make it, so it's just us two today. No Adi, you're welcome. Just gotta crack a little jokes there. Here it's a Thursday night. This will be out on a Friday if I can get to the editing quick enough, but I'm not going to bore you guys with the details. Let's get straight into the action. There's a lot trending right now, especially with the main thing being ESPN's top 25 list. And I have a general question and then a little focus question to ask you. And the general question is ESPN's top 25 under 25 for the future. So they had guys like LaMelo, like Jason Tatum, and the placement was a little iffy. So my question is, what are the biggest misplacements on this list?
I think the biggest one for me is probably De'Aaron Fox because right now I think he's listed around somewhere around 6, somewhere around 7. And honestly, I think he's got a lot of potential, but compared to a lot of other guys, like he's above Devin Booker, he's above Bam Adebayo, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's not acceptable to me because De'Aaron Fox is he's a great young player, but we're talking about Devin Booker here who's set scoring records. I mean, there are a lot of other guys I'd rather have above him. And then there's Ben Simmons, who's right behind De'Aaron Fox. And honestly, I know I've been very critical of Ben Simmons. We all have. And the main thing about him is the fact that he's not really progressed. He hasn't shown any sign of he's progressed in ways, but he hasn't shown massive potential. He has a lot of potential, but he hasn't really shown it. And the odds of him getting up to 25, potentially 30 points per game is pretty low knowing him.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to leave LaMelo out because that'll be the next thing we talk about. I'll save the rest for later. I think the biggest misplacement, and if you know me, you know I'm not a big fan of Trae Young, and honestly, I think people who listen don't think I'm a big fan of Trae Young. But having him below Michael Porter Jr. is criminal. I mean, he's putting up 28-9 this season. He's putting up freakish numbers. Hawks are succeeding, and they're putting him below the third option on the Nuggets. And Michael Porter Jr. has a super high ceiling and a relatively safe floor. I think you could put him in this list, but not above Trae Young. I think Trae Young has a really bright future in this league, and right now his floor, which is what he's playing like right now or a little worse, is better than Michael Porter Jr. probably will ever be. I think it's kind of disrespectful to him to put him below Michael Porter Jr. And I think the De'Aaron Fox placement was a little too high. I think Ben Simmons, people are still putting him up in those lists of high potential because they're like the potential of him starting to hit threes, but it's never going to happen. So the potential is slowly going down. I think his ceiling's pretty low and his floor is the best of anybody on that list. I think generally his placement is too high, but I can't knock him for having their hopes high on him still, even though I don't think he will ever reach his potential. But my sub question is about LaMelo, and that is LaMelo too high on this ESPN top 25 list? He's number 3 on the list above guys like Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, and Donovan Mitchell.
I think he's placed perfectly where he is because Luka and Zion are ahead of him as they should be. Me being a Celtics fan, I was thinking about the Tatum part. He was above Tatum, but at the end of the day, this list is purely on raw potential. And this guy, if you look at his starter stats, when he was getting stable minutes as a starter, he was putting up 26 and 6. I know, Ben, I am sometimes overly critical of LaMelo because obviously, he's a hot shot right now, but at the end of the day, you look at what he's doing, and he's 19. He's only 19. I don't want to sound like a Tatum fan. Although I am, but at the end of the I think that he's got the most raw potential out of any of these guys besides Zion or Luka.
Yeah, no, I think when people saw the list, they thought that it was more of, first thing they thought is this is just ranking guys under 25. And it's not. It's off of their potential and where they'll be in 5 years is basically what the list is. And the other thing that people seem to forget is LaMelo's putting up numbers at 19 that the guys putting up Jason Tatum numbers weren't putting up at 19. I think it's fair placement. I think you could put Tatum over him and you could put Donovan Mitchell over him. I wouldn't be angry, but I think it's very fair placement. I think he deserves that 3 spot. At 19 years old, this rookie season, just his total numbers, not the starter numbers you mentioned, were 16, 6, and 6, on 45, 38, 80 shooting splits. And then you look at Jason Tatum at his age 19, his rookie season was putting up 14, 5, and 1. So we're not comparing him like talent-wise today compared to Jason Tatum today. We're comparing him at 19 to Jason Tatum at 19. And when we're talking about age, LaMelo is about like 4 or 5 years younger than like everyone else that's in the top 10, top 15 of this list. So not only is it that he's putting up better numbers by far than any of these guys put up at 19, also probably some of the best numbers at 19 anyone's ever put up, but also the fact that he's like a considerable amount younger than these guys on the list. So I think putting him at 3 is really fair placement. I think people got too caught up in the fact that ESPN loves LaMelo, so they would put him high. But no, I think his placement's fair, and I think it's actually kind of unfair to judge him off of his current state of talent to like Jason Tatum, multiple-time All-Star starter. I think that's ridiculous to me. But my next question I'm going to ask you is Kawhi Leonard. He's rumored that he would be intrigued with joining Jimmy Butler on the Heat. And my question to you is, does Kawhi Leonard change the Heat's title favorites much? And does he make, or their title odds much? And does he make them title favorites?
Absolutely. I think that they would definitely be contenders with him because Kawhi Leonard, we all know what impact, what he brings to the table. He's a terrific defender, and he's a 26-point per game scorer, and he has the highest field goal percentage of his career. So he's not really showing any signs of regression. He's still going to keep going up and up. He's not like young talent exactly, but he's looking very stable right now. I don't think that that's exactly what the Heat need in terms of like their team needs. I think depth is what they need. But anytime you secure a guy like him, obviously they have the cap space. The Heat have a lot of cap space, but if you secure a guy like Kawhi, I think they could land a spot above the Bucks. I don't know about the 76ers or the Nets, but I think that at the 3 seed, they would definitely be contenders.
I think they would be the 2nd seed in the East, but honestly, the move doesn't, as much as it would elevate them, because Kawhi Leonard would elevate literally anybody in the NBA right now, it just doesn't make much sense. They're at least a top 10, maybe top 5 defensive team in the league when fully healthy, and they have great forward depth. So getting a guy like Kawhi Leonard, yeah, it'd be great. Like, you get a 2-time defensive player of the year in his prime, putting up great offensive numbers, who's been playing to MVP level at points in this season. Obviously, that would be great, but I think there's better parts to focus on. Like, you have Victor Oladipo, who you traded for this season, re-signing him, maybe going for Kyle Lowry if you trade Goran Dragic. I think you have better things to worry about than Kawhi Leonard, where it's like a team with great wide receivers going for Kyle Pitts right now, where it's like, yeah, he would elevate you. He's a generational talent, but he's not your main need. You need to fix your main needs before you go for more superstars. And I think the Heat are a great team already when they're fully healthy. So getting Kawhi Leonard, that really doesn't make much sense to me. I think they just need to add on depth, like you said.
Yeah, but the thing is that right now they had a very slow start to the season. I know they had a lot of injuries, but they need to recover right now. Who better? And I mean, the East is getting more and more competitive. So who better to elevate your team than Kawhi Leonard? I think that if you have Jimmy playing, you could have Jimmy play the 2 spot. You have him at the shooting guard. You can make some you can still add a lot of depth even if you sign Kawhi Leonard. Like I said, they have a lot of cap space. So signing Kawhi Leonard isn't going to immediately block them from getting more depth. It'll prevent them from getting more players, of course, but they'll still be able to have enough cap space for a couple of new players that'll increase their level of play.
Yeah, obviously if you get Kawhi Leonard, great. Your title odds go straight up in the market. But what I'm saying is there's things that I would rather improve on than just getting a superstar. That's kind of like what the Timberwolves have been trying to do, where they have so many holes and they just think, superstar, and then, or just a star, because they don't really have a superstar besides Cat. So they just place a star in there with no context, and then the team always is way lower than expectations. And I think the Heat are smarter than that. I think obviously getting Kawhi Leonard there would be great, but when you have better things to worry about the better things. And I think Kawhi is probably going to re-sign with the Clippers anyways. But the next thing I want to talk about is Lonzo for OUBRE. This was rumored to happen before the trade deadline, and it just came out that the Warriors rejected Lonzo Ball and a first round pick for Kelly Oubre. So I'll answer this myself once I ask it. And this is: did the Warriors make a mistake turning down Lonzo and a pick for Kelly Oubre? And the first thing I have to say about this is there has to be more to the trade. There's literally no way that they turned down Lonzo for Oubre, Lonzo and a pick for Oubre. I think that's wild of any general manager, and especially the Warriors front office. I don't think they would do that. But I think you could definitely, like, obviously having Lonzo is better than having Kelly Oubre for the future. But if I'm being real here, I don't think that would be like a move that would be game changing. Yeah, I think I get why they rejected it kind of. I think getting a new guy in their system this year when they're already on the brink of like being in the play-in tournament, they're almost falling out. Just keeping your same guys together for the playoff push is smart. Kelly Oubre has gotten a lot better since the start of the year. And I mean, if you're not bringing back Oubre, you can either get him on a cheap deal or let him walk. But Lonzo's going to ask for a lot of money, and you're going to have to match the lot of money if you want to keep him. So trading for Lonzo is a commitment time-wise since he's a restricted free agent this offseason. Teams are going to offer him 20, maybe even $25 million to come join the basketball team, and you would have to match it or else you would just be trading for a pick for Oubre. So generally, I think trading for Lonzo, unless they wanted to keep him long-term and like run Curry at the shooting guard for their championship runs, I think it was not exactly a smart deal, but I can see why they said no.
I see what you're saying, but at the end of the day, like you still, I personally don't think that trade was. I think that trade was too good to be true. There has to be more to it, like you said. But at the end of the day, like Kelly Oubre is still like Kelly Oubre. He's a scorer. His main things, like his only things he can do really well is he's a good scorer. Well, he's inefficient, but he's a 15-point per game scorer, and he has athleticism, but he's also a liability on defense, and he's really inefficient. The problem with Kelly Oubre is also the fact that he's going to ask for money. Like Alonzo and like a lot of other guys in this league, Kelly Oubre has has a larger ego than normal. I mean, he has a history of asking for too much money. So I see what you're saying when you say Alonzo, like it would kind of clog up their team because they have Steph. I personally wouldn't want to have Steph like play the two. I would still want to have him play the one. But if you're offered a trade like that, I would say you take on Lonzo and then you don't stick with Lonzo. You don't stick with Lonzo long term. I think you try and formulate another trade once you get him. You try and get him, and then after that, you get more pieces from that. Because if you're keeping Lonzo, Steph, and Clay, that's really not going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, they could run Clay at the 3 and then decide who plays point guard. But it generally, I mean, like, obviously the Warriors would win that trade by a mile if they were, since it seems like they're not going to bring back Oubre with all the comments that have been made about him. But I'm generally just trying to make a side here, and I think just Lonzo would be more of a long-term investment money-wise, and you would have to pay him more than Oubre. But generally, it would be a confusing trade for both teams, and I just don't get what happened on the Pelicans side. I don't know why they would offer a first-round pick and him for Oubre, who's had locker room issues and has had efficiency issues over the year. But my next question to you is about the Toronto Raptors. They're in a very confusing place, but they seem to be headed toward a rebuild. And my question to you is, do the Raptors rebuild, restructure, or something else this offseason?
I think right now rebuilding immediately or rebuilding this offseason would be pretty much a letdown because I think the main way to go is a restructure because this team they have so much talent on their team. They've got Van Vliet, they've got Anunoby, they've got young talent. The main problem with them, and I've analyzed this, and it looks like it's their poor ability to get to the line and their second half fatigue. Those are fixable problems. They have the scoring. They have pretty much what it takes to be a solid team in the East. But the problem is their structure. They lost guys like Serge Ibaka. They lost Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol was actually pretty good last season. He's really not the same as he used to be this season. But right now, when I say restructure, I mean you don't get those heavy, talented guys. You get younger guys like role players, bench players who can fill like the defensive void that you lost when you lost Serge Ibaka.
All right, so I get what you're saying. They don't have a young core. like plain and simple, it's Malachi Flynn. That's all they have in a young core. What they have right now, if you think of Siakam, Van Vliet, and Anunoby as a young core, that's guys nearing their peak, and they're not a playoff team. And they have Kyle Lowry on the roster who's walking this offseason. I think they don't have anyone who can develop much more. I think Anunoby's the only one who really can develop of those guys. I think obviously Malachi Flynn could be something, but that would take massive development. And Toronto's not a great free agency mark. And you said they have the potential to be a really solid team in the East. Is the final goal to be a solid team, or is it to be a championship team? I think you have to go for your franchise guy. Siakam's not a franchise guy. Van Vliet's not a franchise guy when it comes to talent-wise. I'm thinking of the future of winning a championship, not the future of being mediocre for a really, really long time. Trust me, Hornets fan, know how it feels. You don't want to be mediocre in a consistently rising East, where a core of Siakam, Van Vliet, and Anunoby is not going to win you anything, maybe not even a playoff series for the next 5 years. So I think you have to rebuild, trade away some valuable pieces that your city loves, and get to getting a top guy in this draft, building around him, and building a championship team in the near future, not just constructing a mediocre team that's going to be a first or second round exit every year like the Celtics are.
And the thing is that what do you like? What hurts you from giving another year? I'm not saying that you keep going.
What hurts you is 1 year off your future, where this is a draft class that could be one of the greatest draft classes in NBA history as it's been hyped up to be. I mean, all of the guys in the top 5 would have been the first pick in this last year's draft beforehand. I think if you're going to try to make it another year, you're already losing Lowry. Lowry has vocally wanted to leave so we can go to a contending team, and they've tried to trade him away, and they don't have a young core. They don't really have young pieces that can develop, and they're not a free agency market. They need to rebuild. They need to stock up on a little more picks so they can make it homegrown again like they did with Siakam and Van Vliet, and they just can't stick to mediocrity. I hate when teams do that. There is harm.
I don't think that this is really going to be, when I say that, I don't mean mediocrity when I say that. I think that they could be a 3 seed, a 2 seed, potentially. It happened last year. They have so much talent on their team.
The East got a lot better. The East got a lot better at the top this year compared to last year. And also the Raptors lost key pieces and now are just on the steady decline of losing valuable pieces. I mean, they traded Terrence Davis for a second round pick, Matt Thomas for a second round pick. Those are decent young role players, and you traded them for second round picks so you could clear a spot to trade away Lowry. They're not going to do anything. They can't get a 3 seed. I genuinely do not think a core where your 3 best players are Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, and OG Anunoby can be a 3 seed right now or in the next 5 years. I think they have to rebuild so they're not just stuck being a first-round exit every year. They're not going to do anything with these people. They need to get young talent that can be a franchise-changing player.
And the problem is that those 3 can still develop. They don't have,
What jump are they going to make?
Exactly. 8 years to get to their prime. I mean, realistically, they're still all relatively young. They're not young assets, but they're still relatively young. They haven't hit their peak yet. I think
Siakam's 27. He's already peaked. We've seen it. I mean, you can see it with the eye test, you can see it with the stats, and he's 27 years old. He's peaking. You're not going to get anything more than what you're getting out of Pascal Siakam right now. Same with Siakam,
especially, but
and then OG Anunoby can still get better. But if OG Anunoby is your growing piece, you don't have a young core. So you need to establish a young core. You need to rebuild, maybe ship out Siakam to a team that's trying to take that next step, get some picks and a young asset or two, and then just rebuild. Get young assets. Maybe get Cade in this draft. Maybe jump up in the draft process, in the draft lottery, or get a top 5 guy in this draft and try to build a championship team over time. But mediocrity is not the answer, and first-round exits are definitely not the answer. So my next question to you is about the Suns. They played the Jazz Wednesday night, and they won in overtime. It was a pretty thrilling game. A lot of big shots from Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker, but the Suns did prevail, and now they're only 1.5 games behind the 1-seed Jazz. My question to you is, have the Suns proven they're the best team in the West?
No, I definitely disagree with that. I don't think they're better. I honestly don't think they're better than the Jets. I think they're the third best in the East right now. Because right now, the Lakers are still the best team in the West. They're still the best team. They're fully healthy squad. There's just no team in the okay, maybe the Nets, but there's no team that just matches that level of firepower. I've said this so many times before. Anthony Davis's impact. Anthony Davis has one of the greatest impacts in the NBA today. He can stretch the floor. He can lock down like a star player, and he's just an absolute paint beast.
Mm-hmm.
So they're missing him. They're missing LeBron. And those role players, those are role players. The role players on the Lakers right now are like getting 30, 35. They're getting heavy minutes. They're not supposed to be playing well right now. They're not in that kind of situation. So when they get all their players back, I mean, right now they have like the Lakers have like four guys that are like above 14 points per game when their whole roster is fully healthy, but they just signed Andre Drummond. Now, Andre Drummond is still one of the greatest rebounders of all time. He is a big addition to that team.
He's not a big addition. I'm sorry, Andre Drummond. I hate to dog him every time that his name comes out of someone's mouth, but he's not a big addition. There's so many centers that are better and better impacts to their teams than Andre Drummond is. Andre Drummond.
But when you sign him for like such a minimum deal,
yeah, no, he's an average and above center. He's nothing special. He's not going to change your title odds. He's better than Marc Gasol, except for Marc Gasol's been playing better than Andre Drummond ever since Drummond came to LA. Marc Gasol's been playing great. For some reason, he came back to life. I think when it comes to the Suns, because I want to stay on the Suns, not just talk about the Lakers role players. I think they have proven they're better than the Jazz. I think they're definitely a better team, especially come playoff time than the Jazz. I think Chris Paul is a proven playoff player. We saw what Devin Booker could do last year in the bubble in 8 games with a team that was still getting players off injury, and Ricky Rubio as his side help. They have a lot of established playoff players on that team, and Chris Paul to lead them all the way. They have defense, they have offense, they have the whole package, and I think they're better than the Jazz, who, especially come playoff time, as we've seen in the past, Rudy Gobert getting manipulated in the playoffs like he always does. I think I would take the Suns over the Jazz in a playoff series. I think that's official for me. I think you could say they're better than the Clippers, but they're not better than the Lakers. I agree with you there. I think Ben McLemore is a big pickup. Andre Drummond is an improvement over Marc Gasol, maybe. And then, I mean, you have LeBron, AD, Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell. You have a great team in LA, and I think that them coming out of the West is very likely unless they have role player fatigue plus LeBron and AD trying to get back into it, going against a team like the Nuggets, maybe if it's a 4-5 matchup, and then the Nuggets are hitting their stride at the right time like they are right now. I think we could potentially see that happen in the first or second round, or potentially only the first. I don't see them making it out of the first round and then losing. I think LeBron would go all the way at that point. But I think they're definitely better than the Jazz. But hell no way that they're better than the Lakers.
Ben, when I say the thing about Andre Drummond is that like he's not a good starting center. I think we meet there at that idea. But when you have a guy like him coming off the bench, like him being your third best big, that's big. That's big because I know I would put like Montrezl Harrell. He has his weaknesses, but he's still like a good scorer. He's still a good addition.
No, they're starting Drummond though. That's the thing. Drummond's
their but when their squad is fully healthy,
they'll still be starting Drummond. That's the promise they made to him when they signed him, that they'll be starting Andre Drummond, and that's a slight that's either a neutral or a slight weakness, depending on how we see Andre Drummond play with LeBron and AD when they come back. I can't say anything yet, but he definitely doesn't make that big of an impact. But I mean, either or, before Drummond and now with Drummond, they're better than the Suns. The Suns could compete with them in the playoffs, surely. But I would definitely, if I had to bet my money, I would pick the Lakers there. And the next thing I want to talk about, last thing in basketball today, and that is the Brooklyn Nets. Always good to talk about them. People always love to hear about the Brooklyn Nets. And they just got KD back the other night. He dropped 17 off the bench. And my question to you is, who is the most important piece to the Nets title run this season?
I'm definitely gonna. I think I'm gonna go with KD on this one because I can see why some people say Harden. I don't know about Kyrie, but if you look at the goal for this Nets team, the goal isn't to make it to the first round or the second round or the championship game. Their goal is to win it all. Their goal this year is to win it all. And if we're looking at the playoffs solely, the playoffs have been Harden's weak spot. It's been Kyrie has had his moments in the playoffs, but he's also struggled at some points in the playoffs. The one guy who really has not struggled at all is Kevin Durant. He is consistently for the eight of his last playoff years, he's consistently never been below 28 points per game, and he's always been efficient. He's always been the dagger in the playoffs. He's beat LeBron 2 times in a row, even though he's been on a stacked Warriors team. He's still done it. So right now, the goals of this Nets team is to win it all. And if anybody's going to really show up, if I'm going to take those three, who is going to show up in the clutch, in the playoffs, it's going to be KD.
All right, no. So what you basically just said is that KD isn't the most important piece to them winning a championship this year. It's a little wacky, but KD is going to be KD in the playoffs. He's established that. Kyrie, most of the time, is going to be Kyrie in the playoffs. And Harden is a really underrated playoff player. He's just been on teams that haven't been able to prevail over the other teams. He plays good in the playoffs, but I think you're going to get KD any night. If James Harden can continue his regular season play into the playoffs, they'll be unbeatable. And I think that's partially why he's the most important piece to this team winning a championship. And the main thing is the Nets, they weren't necessarily struggling, but they weren't living up to their potential before the James Harden trade. Am I right or am I wrong? They weren't being what we thought the Nets would be. They get Harden, they struggle for a little bit for a couple games when they first get into it because the defense, and then it just started to click. And as soon as that chemistry started clicking, they started playing more on the floor together. Harden's averaging 11 assists, and they just can't lose. They're just unbeatable. I think James Harden, the way he's adapted from not a selfish, but a mandatory selfish scorer, averaging 34 plus points per game, to going to a 24 and 11 guy is absolutely phenomenal. And the way he can adapt to be from a team that's completely carried by him to now being the point guard on a super team has been phenomenal. And I think that's also why he's definitely the most important piece to this team. Kevin Durant missed time. He missed a lot of time, a concerning amount of time where people thought something really bad happened to him. And they really didn't miss a beat. They got better than before when they didn't have KD. And it was just Harden and Kyrie. And some nights it would just be Harden. Some nights it would just be Kyrie. I think Harden and Kyrie have established themselves as those two could go out of the East without KD. So I think you can't go with KD. They've been succeeding too much without him. I think Harden's definitely the most important piece to this team winning a championship.
Okay, if we were to exclude all the playoffs, I would definitely say Harden. I mean, for the regular season, but the most important part to this goal of this team is to win in the playoffs. And I just said, that proves my point. If the Nets are going to be looking towards KD, that is going to be their guy. If they need a clutch bucket in the playoffs, if they need someone to really lift them up in the playoffs who they know is not going to falter because he hasn't really faltered at all, that is going to be their guy. That's the most important person. I see what you're saying in a way that if Harden plays really well in the playoffs, it's good. I see what you're saying with that.
When has he been a bad playoff player recently, though? That's the thing. That's just.
He choked in that last game against the Warriors. I think they combined shot. I don't remember the exact stat, but they missed all their threes in that one.
Was that him, game. Or was that him, Eric Gordon, the rest of the team, and a team that didn't have Chris Paul and would have won that game if they had Chris Paul? And that was their best facilitator. That wasn't James Harden missing 27 threes himself. And also, last year, on 48% shooting, he averaged 30 points per game in the playoffs. They went to the second round and just lost to LeBron and AD clicking at the right time. Can we blame him for that? Is that why he's a bad playoff player? Averaged 32 points per game in the playoffs the year before that. He's not a bad playoff player. I think Now that he's more settled in a role of a point guard, his efficiency is going to be even better since it does slip a little bit in the playoffs. So he's just going to be more of a complete player when it comes playoff time. And also, come playoff time, it's impossible to scheme against them because usually it's like, okay, 2 people on Harden. Okay. 2 people on Kyrie. Okay. 2 people on KD. You don't have 6 players. And then there's also 2 more people on the floor with them that are also like Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge. So when it comes playoff time, James Harden's going to be much less of a triple team threat than he was on the Rockets. So I think actually I'm going to switch my answer here because you could easily go with any of the 3 guys. I think I got to choose LaMarcus Aldridge or Blake Griffin as the most important piece to this team winning a title. Their play in the playoffs will be the most important because people will be primarily focusing on the big 3. And so Blake Griffin and what he can do in the playoffs and what LaMarcus Aldridge can do and what that team's bench can do in the playoffs will decide the fate of this team really in the end because we know what those 3 guys are going to give you. They're going to give you what they have right now every single game.
Yes, but no, because I see what you're saying, but at the end of the day, they're not going to look to LaMarcus Aldridge. They're not going to look to Blake Griffin to carry them to the win. When they're down by 10 in the fourth quarter, they're going to
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin are playing at the level they've been playing on the Nets, they won't need to be down 10. That won't be necessary. So if they continue to step up and play like this come playoff time, then there won't be the issue of being down 10. And that's why they're the biggest X factor. I think there's nothing that's not going to make KD, James Harden, and Kyrie effective, but you could definitely see a Blake Griffin or a LaMarcus Aldridge in 2021 not being productive come playoff time. But the next thing I want to talk about, Sam Darnold, biggest thing in football right now, something we haven't heard since draft day, and we didn't even hear that on draft day. But Sam Darnold traded to the Panthers for a 2nd, 4th, and 6th round pick. And my question is, can Darnold be the Panthers franchise quarterback?
I'm gonna start this one off, but I don't think he's gonna be the franchise quarterback. Could he be? Yeah, obviously. I mean, I think he could be, but I'm willing to put money on him not being. Because he's been in the league for 3 years. He's been on the Jets for a while. You can always bring up the fact that he hasn't really had those weapons, but there's a point where you need to draw the line. Because since he's come into the Jets, they've been the 2nd fewest in points, last in total yards per last in first downs, and last in 3rd down conversions. The quarterback is the most valuable guy to that spot, regardless of who you have around him. He is the one who you really need to blame there. The fact that he's had no significant statistical progression or any progression that you've seen him play, you put him on another team and the thought that he's automatically going to be such a different player, that I can't agree with.
You're being ignorant. Okay. How at all is he supposed to develop with Adam Gase as his coach? How at all? Let me tell you about Adam Gase. Let me tell you about actually Ryan Tannehill. Let me focus on him. Tennessee Titans. You're a Titans fan yourself. You should know this. That when Tannehill left the Miami Dolphins and he left the Gase trap, then he instantly became from mediocre to now a top quarterback, like a top 10, top 15 quarterback in the league right now. He's been terrific ever since he got in Tennessee. And that's because he finally got into a good coach's system and he finally got weapons to throw to and hand it off to Derrick Henry. Got to give him his credit. And he finally started to get better than he was in Miami. You see Sam Darnold, who's significantly younger, and going from Adam Gase, honestly, the worst coach that I have ever seen. And then you put him in the hands of Joe Brady, who, let me tell you about a guy from Ohio State who was a bum, an absolute bum, who couldn't even play in garbage time. He goes to LSU, transfers there, and then in the span of 1 year, goes from a 16 touchdown guy to a 50 touchdown guy, and is the Heisman, leading the best offense in college football history. And his name is Joe Burrow. He was working under Joe Brady, and now he was the first pick in the draft, I think. And also, just to mention, Sam Darnold is younger than Joe Burrow is right now. So you get just only the coach alone. You get him with the offensive coordinator and Joe Brady to turn him into whatever he can turn him into. Plus, you have DJ Moore as a receiver. You have Robbie Anderson. You have Dan Arnold. You have Christian McCaffrey, the best receiving back and the best back in the business right now. And then you have a team that also has the 8th pick that could potentially be Kyle Pitts or more offensive line help. So I don't see a world where he has no shot at this. Of course, he hasn't had progression. He's been under Adam Gase for 3 years. What's he supposed to do? Throw to Jamison Crowder the entire game? Who else has he had to throw to? Nobody. Terrible offensive line. Defense couldn't keep him off the field. And now you have Brian Burns, Jeremy Chin, and Denzel Perryman. You have a great defensive core now that's going to improve with the draft. But generally, I think he could turn into it. Of course, it's not a locked bet, but I see it being a lot like a Tannehill situation. And I think he could be the quarterback for their future winning a Super Bowl. I don't think he'd be top 5, but he could definitely win a Super Bowl as the starting quarterback on that team.
The problem with the Tannehill, the problem with that comparison is that Tannehill was mid. He was middle of the pack. Sam Darnold is absolute garbage there. He was absolute garbage.
Tannehill was also not 23 years old.
No, but it does not matter.
That does matter.
Age does not matter.
Age does matter when it comes to development.
So terribly like he did.
Do players develop more when they're 30 than when they're 20? That he's in the developing stage, and he hasn't had anybody to develop him. That's why he can easily get better. There's the ceiling he had coming into the draft, and then he got trapped in the Jets' trap. And now, I mean, obviously he can develop. He's a lot younger than Tannehill was when he was shipped out of Miami.
Man, look at Trubisky. Trubisky was in a terrible situation, and he didn't get any time to develop. He didn't get any development help whatsoever. Are people looking at him and saying that if he gets put in a good situation, is he going to be good? No, because people know
he wasn't okay. No. He was a Pro Bowler in his first year. He's not been in a terrible situation. He's had Allen Robinson to throw to last season,
but he hasn't.
Not a good.
They failed to develop him.
He's not in a terrible situation. He's not in a Jets-like situation, and he's definitely not in Adam Gase's hands when he was under Nagy. That's not the same. That's not comparable at all.
I mean, to a certain extent, it is because the problem with your argument is that you're completely ignoring how Darnold played there. You can keep bringing up the coach. You can keep bringing up everything about their offense to a certain extent. That is very true. But if you're just you're not doing anything at all with an offense. Those receivers, as bad as they are, they still made it to the NFL. They're still somewhat capable.
They're NFL caliber.
They're still somewhat capable of catching a well-placed pass. As long as a well-placed
You're making
pass,
the argument that they are receivers that have made the NFL. That's why he should be developing on the Jets.
No, but
he has Adam Gase and then the worst receiving core besides maybe the Ravens. And I would say the Ravens have a better receiving core than the Jets did last season, easily. I mean, Hollywood Brown would be the best receiver on the Jets last season. I mean, truly, the receiving core was terrible. Credits to my boy Jamison Crowder, but there was nobody to throw to. With a terrible offensive line, a terrible defense, Frank Gore is his running back, and then the worst coach in the league who was then fired. He had no room to grow. How could a quarterback grow? That's ridiculous and stubborn to think that he just should have grown. And comparing him to Trubisky, who's now going from a decent situation with a top receiver in the league, a decent coach, and a good defense, it's comparable to the Jets, and then leaving for the Bills to be a backup quarterback compared to being traded to the Panthers with a guy that made a magical transformation on Joe Burrow in 1 year at LSU. That's a completely stubborn take, and I think we have to move on now. And my next thing is the Falcons have been looking to trade pick number 4, and I got 2 questions for you. You can answer them back to back, and that is, who should call the Falcons for pick 4, and is it smart for them to trade this pick right now?
I think that I have 2 teams in mind that really should try and get a new QB, and this class has a lot of QBs that could definitely lead a team. And I'm going to go with the Patriots because the Patriots have a lot of assets, and they've been going all in. So if you get a QB like Trey Lance or Justin Fields, you get a good QB, that would be great for them. And the Denver Broncos have really been struggling ever since Manning's retired. They just they haven't had a good history of drafting good quarterbacks. I think this is the time where you really break that curse. And to answer, should the Falcons trade that pick? I think that they need to move on from Matt Ryan. There are definitely options for them in terms of quarterbacks to draft, but unless you're offered a really good package, like a package that you really shouldn't like miss out on, don't trade the pick.
All right. So they readjusted Ryan's contract, so it's basically untradeable because they just want to make it clear that he is the quarterback of their future until he's done. Which I mean, I don't support that. I don't think it was a good move, but I mean, at this point, you're just stuck with Matt Ryan. That's what they want to do. Kyle Pitts, they have a good receiving core. They have a great receiving duo. Of course, the rest isn't beautiful, but they have a pretty decent, like Russell Gage is pretty good. They have a pretty good receiver core. So getting Kyle Pitts really isn't all that it really isn't all that much of a game changer for your team. And of course, drafting a quarterback doesn't make all that much sense. And then nothing really makes sense for them to draft with this pick. So I mean, if you're bringing Ryan back, you have Julio, who's nearing the end, and then Calvin Ridley, who's a great receiver right now. I think if someone's calling you trading a lot of assets, like maybe the Bears call and give you some defense for that pick, then I would absolutely do that because there's teams like the Bears, like the Patriots that need a quarterback and they could get one at pick 4. And this is where I'll move on to the who should call them part of this. I think the Bears have to do this. I mean, they've been consistently in rumors. They called for Russell Wilson this offseason, and then they settled for a person somehow worse than Mitch Trubisky. So I think trading up for this pick, getting the quarterback, not only a quarterback, but a quarterback for your future and long term. I think there's a chance Mac Jones goes 3rd. So if you could get Justin Fields 4th or Trey Lance 4th, that's ridiculous for you. And you could have that guy with your defense and Allen Robinson finally getting help. And then, of course, the Patriots, but they seem pretty safe with Cam Newton. I don't understand it, but they seem to like Cam Newton for the season. And I think also the Broncos. I think the Broncos could move up, get that pick. They're another team that has a great defense and has needed a quarterback for so long. But generally, there's a lot of teams that need to be calling for this pick, and Kyle Pitts would be the main target for them, or maybe they take Sewell here. But generally, I think if you're looking to contend or do something with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, then I think you trade the pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the only sensible thing to do. Matt Ryan is really a questionable case because a lot of people think that his career has been like over glorified because of Julio Jones. But at this point in his career, I didn't like you said, I agree with that. I didn't really like that move to make him to declare that they're going to keep him because there's some point where there needs to be a point where you move on.
Yeah, and the next thing, speaking of moving on, let's move on to the next thing we want to talk about, and that is, should the Panthers go with Kyle Pitts, assuming all these are still wide open, Kyle Pitts, O-line, or defense at the 8th pick in the draft? Panthers fan myself, I'll start this off. I think Kyle Pitts, obviously, literally nobody could hurt from having Kyle Pitts or drafting Kyle Pitts. I think he's a generational talent in my eyes who can basically just elevate any receiver core and any quarterback if you draft that guy. So I think getting Kyle Pitts would be obviously that wouldn't hurt, but I don't think it's the best thing for them to do. I think there's better things for them to upgrade. I think the offensive line, if Sewell is there, if the Bengals don't go for Sewell and the Falcons don't go for Sewell and he's still there at 8, you pick him. If he's not there, Slater's a safe pick. He doesn't have nearly the same potential, but he has a very high ceiling, and offensive linemen are very easy to develop. So picking Slater there is pretty smart, and then getting a corner there would also be pretty smart on their end. I think the main thing is just not going with Kyle Pitts. I think the receiver core is pretty established in Carolina, and really upgrading the offensive line to help Sam Darnold flourish, and then also getting some corners because the corners and Jeremy Chin and nobody else isn't going to do it for you in Carolina.
I definitely agree with that, but I think it's clear cut for me that they need to go for. They don't really need. I don't think it's a defensive play. They need. I think their main guy is an offensive lineman because if you want any chance in Sam Darnold being good for you, you need to upgrade his O line. I think his receiving core is already elite enough because they're not elite, but they're definitely above average because there's DJ Moore and then they've got Robbie Anderson. The Panthers did lose Curtis Samuel, but I mean you guys still have two stable receivers. Kyle Pitts, you don't need another guy like him. I think that McCaffrey, if you get a guy like Sewell, McCaffrey will definitely love having a great offensive tackle. And then it would be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, look, I think Dan Arnold, like he's very solid. He's going to be a reliable guy for Darnold to throw to. So picking him, like they picked him up from Arizona, and I think that's a very solid pickup. There's no need for Pitts in this offense, but again, he would elevate them in some sorts. But the last thing we want to talk about today is the Niners traded up for pick 3, and everyone's thinking Justin Fields, Trey Lance, but really what's being heard right now is that they're going to go with Mac Jones with this pick, whether it be a smokescreen or not. Do you think it's smart for them to go with Mac Jones at 3?
I think that there are better QBs. I don't think that Mac Jones is the most talented out of Fields and Lance, but I'm going to say it's not a terrible decision because Mac Jones is a terrific field general, and, and Shanahan loves QBs who can specialize in the pocket and do play action. That guy, they don't need a great scrambler. His main weakness is scrambling, but they don't in his system. They don't need that. Mac Jones is a perfect fit for the 49ers. I think that there are definitely better QBs, more skilled QBs, but if they pick him, I mean, it won't be the end of the world.
I think it will be. I think it honestly will be. I hate to pull the race card, but like thinking that Mac Jones is better than Justin Fields honestly just has to be racism. Like I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that I have to go there, but it's just true. Mac Jones, did you see his pro day? I mean, it wasn't just one overthrow. He had an amazing, like an elite receiver core at Alabama. And then you look at Justin Fields. I mean, the arm talent, the rushing, his vision, his accuracy. I think the one thing that he needs to improve on that could elevate him to like the best person in the class would be his decision making and reading the field. I think like that arm that he has and his scrambling ability is honestly ridiculous. I think there's literally no chance that that any GM in the right mind would take Mac Jones. This has to be a smokescreen. Mac Jones is super mediocre, and he was also not going to go in the top 10. So I don't know why they traded up to get him if they really were trading up to pick 3 to get him. That makes no sense to me. I think thinking he's better than Justin Fields or Trey Lance is just ridiculous. Those are two super, super talented young people, and they'll have great careers. But thinking Mac Jones is the right pick over either of those guys and trading up in the top 3 to get Mac Jones is absolutely ridiculous.
Like I said before, I mean, I don't think Mac Jones is a better QB. I think Trey Lance and Justin Fields are far better QBs in terms of just overall talent. But I mean, he fits perfectly.
What you're saying is he's unathletic and stays in the pocket so that they can't use him to scramble. That's why he fits well. Like, yeah,
he fits well because of his ability to read the field.
Like he stays in the pocket more because he's not mobile at all. These other guys can throw better than he does, and they can also scramble at an elite level. So it makes absolutely no sense to go with him. You're basically just what you're saying is Mac Jones is white. That's why he fits well because he can't run. He's not mobile at all. That's why he fits well because he's Jimmy Garoppolo again. That it's not a smart pick. If they trade up just to get him, it'll be another Trubisky situation. They'll be clowned like it forever. They'll be clowned about it forever. But if they really don't go with him, then that'll be a smart decision in the end game if they develop him right. But I think that'll be it for us today. We'll be back. We're posting consistently now. And if you're still watching, go ahead, like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the video grow. If you press that like button, you could share it with a friend maybe. But that'll be it for us today, and see you guys later.